municipal department needs over the next 5 years. Keep in mind that we are in the process of adding an additional staff person in our information technology department. Presently consists of Eugene, who is one person, and 2 part-time consultants who work for us. So this will greatly increase our capacity. But the technology master plan is something that will be done in concert with the Information Technology Advisory Committee, which Mr. Messeri is the liaison to that group. About a year ago, we activated that committee to identify critical items that we needed to address. And from our discussions, there were 3 things that came up. The first was Code Red. And it was not at that time called Code Red. It was called about emergency notification. And as the board knows, that's ready to kick off, and there will actually be a broadcast notice that's going out. Chief Murphy indicates to me on Friday. So every resident and everyone that has signed up for it will be receiving notification on Friday. It'll be indicating that the system is up and running. But we have about 8,000 telephone numbers, email addresses, and cell phone addresses. So the response has been really quite good. The second item that was identified was a ticketing system for the IT department to assist them in prioritizing projects that came in. And the third thing that we looked at was document management. Those were really the 3 things that were identified. We're in the process of achieving all of those, so the committee needs to get together again to decide what's next. And that's really the important part of this. It consists of not only board and committee, it consists of residents, board and committee members, and department heads. So it's quite wide-reaching in terms of its reach in the town. So those are the information technology resource goals. Questions, feedbacks, comments about it?
Anyone? No.
Secondly, is to improve upon the capital budget process to address critical infrastructure and facility needs. I will readily admit that the new high school project does present some challenges in terms of our availability of capital going forward. As you know, we have a substantial debt exclusion that's on the books. So one of the items that has been suggested through the chairs and vice chairs meeting is looking at dedicating money within our annual revenue stream to be dedicated toward capital. We do not do that. Presently, we pay for our capital in 2 ways: pay as you go, which is free cash or other available funds, or we bond it. We have not dedicated an amount of money from our revenue stream for capital. And I would suggest that the finance department and I will need to take a close look at that. One of the other things that we need to look at is our debt schedule. Typically, when we look at capital, there's been a bit of a disconnect from how it compares to our debt schedule and debt that we're retiring. So we need to be more cognizant of, as we retire debt, looking to bring on new debt to address critical capital needs. The other transition that we're doing is going from a 5-year capital plan to a 10-year capital plan. The Finance Committee identified in their capital summary that they wish to have a 10-year capital improvement plan. It's a challenge, but we do need to go forward and get that process underway. The next objective that we have is for the submission, review, and recommendation of capital projects to be considered at October town meeting. That will necessitate a presentation to the board and recommendations on August 13th. I think I mentioned it to you earlier. It's quite ambitious in terms of the timing involved. Departments need to get their requests in within 2 weeks, and I spoke with Liz today, and there are only 2 capital projects that have been submitted to date. One of them is equipment for the fire department, a fire truck, and the other one is document management, which I submitted on behalf of the administration. And the final recommendation under capital budgeting, infrastructure, and facility needs is to take the necessary actions to complete recommendations as a result of the town hall air quality study, and also to look at upgrading security and access to this building. The scope and the cost of the air quality remains to be determined. It's predicated upon a report that's going to be received from the Mass Department of Public Health. The DPW director is putting together a proposal for security, by security cameras for the building. Not everywhere, but at critical locations, and also completion of the outside door locking mechanisms, which the project was half done, and due to lack of funding was not completed. So those are really the key facility projects. Any questions about facility or capital?
Just a thought, Greg. We had
In terms of the capital financing plan that the Finance Committee put together, and the idea of defining capital from the point of view of what should be in the budget, it would seem to me if we kind of focus on adhering to that policy, we would begin to start to purchase some capital out of the operating budget. So maybe that's a good starting point because it's already in place.
It is.
I would suggest that.
Thank you.
And just as a specific project that you didn't mention, maybe for October that we should be considering is up at the third meeting house at the senior center. I don't know if you've been by there, but they've been working on the rain garden up there, and it really looks terrific, and some new granite curbing. But as a result of that project, they've actually lost some parking space. Some of the parking space happened to be on the lawn, but they've lost some parking space. But on the Bachelor School side, they could probably pick up a few spaces there with a minor project and a stairway leading up, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed because parking up there is tight at times, and it'd be a good parking spot for probably the staff there. We'll take a look at it. You might be getting something from Mrs. Prenny, but I'll do a preemptive strike and throw it out here now for consideration, because as a result of the other project there, they have lost some parking space, and it is kind of vital to make sure that we maintain at least what we had.
They lost spaces that weren't really spaces.
But
We should
Well,
be
it would be
clear on
utilized.
that.
It would be
well, as I
utilized.
know, I said that, some of it was parked partially on the lawns and all the rest, but they've lost it. And we've also permanently removed those by putting in granite curbing, which is probably gonna, part of this, so that it's gonna, probably result in some front-end damage to some of the vehicles up there.
Steve, as you know, Angela's very much involved in that. And we were up there on a Saturday when DPW was doing the work, and I was under the impression that in the placement of some of those curbs, they were actually picking up some spaces over legal spaces over what they had. Okay, which may be very different than what they were using.
The net result of the project is we're gonna have a significantly enhanced, beautified area next to the senior center,
Less
but
parking.
less parking.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and again, the only other area that we should be considering probably is just right next to the Bachelor School, the entrance into
On
the
that
basement
side.
of the building on that
Yep.
side. And we should take a look at,
And we have one other capital project potentially coming from the schools,
The
which is
retaining
the
wall.
school wall.
Retaining wall at the middle school.
Middle school.
Correct. And the other capital project that I did not mention, but we would look at is funding for town roads. Town roads, reconstruction of town roads, non-Chapter 90 eligible town roads. We've appropriated in the past between $200,000 and $250,000 for town roads. It is something that we can borrow for. Typically, we try to fund it from cash because of the fact that it's a reoccurring cost.
Chairman, I'd like to make a proposal that part of the budget process associated with this goal is that, like, for example, this year, when you come in to present on the budget, on the capital, can you just give us a quick review, maybe just one slide of what we purchased, capital we purchased last year, what we
Yeah.
approved at town meeting, and, did we actually complete the process, purchase the equipment, is it delivered? It'd be just nice to know before we go off and do more capital purchases that we know that what we completed in the prior year. I'd like to see that. And the price associated with what we purchased. Because I know in all the cases, we put a budget number in there, but it's not the actual number.
Sure. Good suggestion.
Thank you.
The next goal that I identified was to complete required actions to fill permanent supervisory level vacancies in public safety. The board knows we're under civil service. And under civil service, we report to the State Human Resource Division. They run the civil service program for municipalities. And so we have a couple of vacancies that I have identified that are critical. The first is permanently filling the position of fire chief. And my goal and my objective is to complete the assessment center no later than September. As conversations I've had with the chair, I've already received proposals from vendors who would conduct this work. HRD needs to be involved, so we just can't do an assessment center on our own. And unlike the chief of police position where the state provided an assessment center at no cost to the town, they do not do that for fire chiefs. So we did use this process about 4 years ago when we hired retired Chief Harris, and it worked quite well. And so we would want to go back and utilize the services of a sole source assessment center as an alternative to a written examination. Please keep in mind that those are the alternatives, is the written examination or an assessment center. And I think the assessment center serves the town well, and I believe the board agrees with that proposal also in terms of that's the direction we want to go in. The second objective that I've identified here is to make permanent appointments to a number of openings that we have filled with interim or acting personnel right now. That would be 2 positions of police lieutenant, 2 sergeant positions, a deputy fire chief, and a fire captain. And I know that the press had reported quite well in terms of who the vacancies are and who the personnel that are appointed on an acting basis. There are examinations that will be given September, October of this year by the state. Our obligation is to provide them with a roster of eligible applicants, also to provide the personnel with a reading list, because they have to study for the exam, and the town has to provide them with a reading list that's issued through HRD. So once those examinations are given, we then requisition to fill those positions on a permanent basis. HRD gives us a roster of candidates who have passed the examination. The department head and myself then interview, and recommendations are forthcoming in terms of filling those positions on a permanent basis. The good news is, once we achieve objective 1 and objective 2, we are at full force in terms of filling these positions. It's been quite a challenge with the retirement of people over the last couple of years to stay on top of this, but this really represents the end of the road. Questions on this one?
When do you see getting to that endpoint?
You mean the permanent appointments? Typically, the state, once the exam is given, they give you a certified list within 90 days. One of the challenges, one of the obstacles that sometimes presents itself is if there are challenges to the exam. So individuals have an opportunity to take the exam throughout the state. And then there may be someone who receives their grade and challenges it because they feel the test was somehow unfair. That potentially holds up the certification of the list for a couple of months, but certainly by the end of the year, in terms of looking at time frame, as soon as that list is available, I will request it, and I'd like to make these positions permanent no later than the end of this calendar year. That is my goal.
Thank you.
Just in relation to public safety, any more thought being given to consolidation or regionalization of dispatch?
Yeah,
I know we were talking about it. We've been kicking it around. I know former Chief Harris, retired Chief Harris, was involved in some discussion. I don't know where we're at this particular point in time, but I think all of us, when we've run for office, have talked about sharing services and consolidating things and trying to economize by, whether it be internally within the town, to share certain functions if possible. You know, it's at a savings, or is it going to cost us more? Or can we get involved with the regional dispatch?
We are. We've put our foot in the door with the Middlesex Essex Regional Communication Consortium. I know that Chief Murphy and Chief Warnock have been working on that. I can add it to my list. It's an oversight on my behalf because it was on my list a year ago. So I've put it back on and added to this list.
And maybe aside from public safety, but also shared positions costs with other communities in relation to other services that are provided. And I don't mean to single them out, but whether it be health, veteran services. I've seen other communities now are actually sharing veterans agents, which before was precluded. And I guess the law has changed, which allows communities to consolidate. Again, both of our staff people are doing an excellent job, but it's something that I think we need to continue to investigate, explore. Those opportunities. So I don't know where you're going to fit it in, or if maybe that's one of your goals for this year. But I think we've all talked about it.
Oh, absolutely.
They're near and dear to my heart, that issue. I will look, that, it may fit in with the next goal, which is to work to improve employee